A young king sits on a carved cedar throne in a sprawling courtyard. He is tired. She stops talking about what will destroy a kingdom, and she begins describing the kind of woman who can sustain one. Or more accurately, in the Hebrew, she laughs at the days to come. She does not laugh because the future is safe. The ancient Middle East is incredibly dangerous. Famine is always one dry season away. Disease is a constant shadow. Raiders steal livestock in the dead of night. She laughs because she has armed her house. She is not a housewife crossing items off a list. She is a general standing on a fortified wall. She is an Eshet Chayil, a woman of valor. But the Queen Mother in Proverbs 31 is speaking in poetry. She is describing an ideal. If you want to see this military title attached to a real, breathing human being in the biblical text, you have to leave the palace. You have to travel to a threshing floor in the prey, middle of the night. And the woman who receives the title is the absolute last person you would expect. There is only one specific woman in the entire Hebrew Bible who is explicitly given this title. She is not a queen. She is not a wealthy Israelite matriarch controlling a vast estate. She is a Moabite refugee, a widow who has lost everything, lying in the dark on a threshing floor outside Bethlehem. The air is thick with barley chaff and the smell of crushed grain. Most people assume they know exactly who this woman is. If you grew up anywhere near a church, you have probably encountered the Proverbs 31 woman. It is midnight. The wind is cold, and she has just risked her life and her reputation to approach a landowner named Boaz. She is asking for a redeemer. She is asking for someone to step in and save her and her mother-in-law from starving to death in the coming winter. Boaz wakes up, startled by the figure in the dark at his feet. He listens to her request, and in Ruth chapter 3, verse 11, he answers her. He tells her not to fear. He promises to do whatever she asks, and then he gives his reason. For all my people in the city know that you are a woman of excellence. But the Hebrew word he speaks in the dark is Chayil. He calls her an Eshet Chayil, a woman of valor. This moment is a massive theological anomaly. It completely shatters the modern, domestic reading of Proverbs 31. If you lay the Proverbs 31 checklist next to the life of Ruth, she fails every single metric. She does not consider a field, and by it, she survives, by gleaning the scraps dropped in the dirt by other people's harvesters. She does not have a household of servants to manage. She is a destitute foreigner living with a bitter, grieving mother-in-law. She is not clothed in heavy scarlet wool. She is the ultimate, untouchable domestic ideal. Most people read this text as a spiritual syllabus for Christian wives. She is wearing the dusty garments of a grieving widow. She has no money, no property, no husband, and no social standing. Yet the text grants her the exact same military title as the Queen Mother's ideal woman. How can a woman with nothing be a woman of valor? Because Chayil is not a measurement of material success. It is a measurement of internal substance. Boaz does not call her a warrior because she runs a flawless household. He calls her a warrior because she abandoned everything she knew in Moab to protect Naomi. He calls her a warrior because she crossed a hostile desert, walked into a foreign land where she was despised, and fought for their survival with empty hands. She possesses the exact same fierce, protective strength as the Proverbs 31 woman. She just exercises it in total poverty. The biblical writers are sending a deliberate signal by using the same word in both texts. They are telling you that the armor looks different depending on the season. Sometimes, valor looks like managing a massive supply chain and buying real estate. And sometimes, valor looks like refusing to let your mother-in-law starve, walking into a field of strangers, and bending your back in the hot sun to pick up dropped grain. The title belongs to the queen in the palace. They picture a quiet, serene woman who wakes up before dawn in a perfectly kept house. She spins wool, bakes bread from scratch, and it belongs to the widow in the dust. Because the battle they are fighting is exactly the same. Listen to the sound of the grinding stone. A woman stands in the courtyard of a mud brick house in the hill country of Judea. She is holding a heavy basalt pestle in both hands. She brings it down against the hollowed mortar. A duel. Rhythmic thud echoes off the clay walls. She brings it down again. And again. The gritty dust of crushed barley coats her fingers. The sharp sting of wood smoke is trapped in her heavy wool shawl. She is making bread. But in the ancient Levant, making bread is not a hobby. It is a war against starvation. Every single day in the ancient Middle East is a battle for calories, for warmth, for water. The enemy is not always an army marching over the horizon with bronze swords. The enemy is the drought that cracks the soil. The enemy is the sudden fever that spikes in the middle of the night. The enemy is the crushing weight of infant mortality and the sudden death of the flocks. Against these enemies, the Eshet Chayil draws her weapon. Her sword is the heavy wooden loom. Her shield is the field she bought. Her tactics are the careful, meticulous rationing of olive oil and flour, sews clothes by hand, smiles endlessly at her children, and never experiences a single moment of profound fatigue. They read it as a literal checklist. When she pulls the heavy clay jar from the deep well, the coarse rope burning against her palms, she is fighting for the life of her children. When she stays awake by the flickering orange light of a clay lamp, her eyes stinging from profound fatigue, she is holding the line. She does not wear iron armor. She wears exhaustion like a mantle. Every meal she secures from the dirt is a victory. Every garment she weaves in the dark is a wall built against the winter wind. Every negotiation she wins in the crowded marketplace is a defense of her family's future. This is not a domestic routine. It is a campaign of survival. She is standing in the gap between her people and the chaos of the world. She is holding back the dark with her bare hands. The Queen Mother knew this when she spoke the poem in the palace. Boaz knew this when he woke up on the threshing floor in Bethlehem. The ancient audience knew exactly what they were looking at when they heard the word Chayil. They did not see a quiet housewife keeping a tidy room. They saw a soldier standing her ground. But the echo of that grinding stone does not stop in the ancient hill country, because the war did not end when the biblical era closed. And that checklist has left generations of women staring at their own chaotic lives, feeling overwhelmed, inadequate, and entirely unseen. Look at your own hands. If you are in a season where you feel like you are perpetually failing the Proverbs 31 test, I want you to look at the battlefield of your own everyday life. You may not be grinding barley with a heavy basalt stone in the Judean hill country, but you know exactly what it feels like to hold a line. You know the blue glow of a laptop screen at 11 p.m., your eyes burning as you try to balance a budget that refuses to stretch. You know the cold porcelain of the kitchen sink at dawn, the heavy, hollow ache in your chest as you prepare for a day that will demand more energy than you actually possess. You know the crushing, silent weight of managing the emotional climate of a home, anticipating the fractures in your family before they happen, and stepping into the gap to absorb the impact. For years, modern culture has told you to read Proverbs 31 as a list of things you are failing to accomplish. You have been told to measure your worth against an impossible standard of domestic perfection, smiling effortlessly at the future while you drown in the present. You have been handed a broom when you were actually holding a sword. But that is a lie born of bad translation. But if you look closer at the ancient Hebrew words the Queen Mother actually chooses, at the rhythm of the text, the fatigue sitting in your bones is not a symptom of inadequacy. It is the evidence of valor. You are an Eshet Chayil. You are fighting for the survival of the people you love against the quiet, relentless attrition of modern life. When you stay up late in the dark to comfort a terrified child, you are fortifying a perimeter. When you go to a job that drains you to secure resources for your household, you are capturing a field. When you absorb a conflict to keep peace in a fractured room, you are acting with immense strategic strength. The Jewish husbands singing this poem on a Friday night do not sing it to demand a cleaner house. They sing it to recognize the warrior sitting across the table. They are looking at the exhaustion in her posture, the tension in her jaw, the sheer force of will it took to get the family to the Sabbath rest. They are looking at the absolute magnitude of what she carries. And they are saying, I see the armor. You have permission to drop the checklist. You have permission to stop trying to be a retrofitted homemaker disguised as a biblical ideal. At what actually happens in the original language, you start to see something the traditional reading completely misses. Proverbs 31 is not a recipe for the perfect housewife. The Queen Mother did not speak this poem to make you feel small. She spoke it to describe the fierce, protective, that keeps the world from falling apart. She spoke it to tell you what you actually are. But to fully feel the weight of this title, you have to look at the entire scope of the text one last time. Because when you pull back and look at the whole picture, you realize the biblical writers were not just describing a woman. They were describing the very nature of God. The poem was never about a house. It was always about a battlefield. A queen mother speaks an oracle in a royal courtyard and redefines the architecture of a kingdom. A woman rises in the pitch black of an ancient winter and fortifies her household against the freezing desert wind. A wife dictates terms to Canaanite traders at the city gates and holds back the crushing weight of poverty. A widow walks onto a midnight threshing floor, her clothes smelling of dust and chaff, and secures a future for a starving family. A mother grinds barley against a heavy basalt stone and fights a daily, desperate war against starvation. A husband stands at a Sabbath table with a cup of dark wine and sings a song of valor. It is a battle plan for a warrior. The woman described in this ancient poem is not a submissive homemaker trying to keep the dust off the furniture. Over the woman who is holding his world together. A modern woman grips a cold steering wheel on a Tuesday morning, carrying the invisible fractures of her family in her chest, and holds the line against the dark. One word. One warrior. But maybe the part that stays with me most is the translation itself. The way the ink was deliberately softened, the way translators looked at the word Chayil, the exact same word used to describe King David's elite combat troops. The mighty men who carried heavy leather shields into the blinding dust of war, and decided it must mean something polite when applied to a woman. They took a soldier girding her loins for battle and handed her a broom. It stays with me because of how much unnecessary, suffocating shame that one linguistic choice has caused. It erased the grit. It erased the blood, the sweat, and the sheer force of will required to keep a family alive. If you are in a season where you feel entirely unseen, where the sheer volume of what you manage is written off as ordinary life, Proverbs 31 is a place to sit. You are not failing a domestic performance review. You are executing a campaign of survival. The fatigue sitting deep in your bones is not weakness. It is the cost of valor. If this reached something in you today, subscribe. The text paints her as something fierce, formidable, strategic, and the place to start dismantling the illusion is the very first word. Leave a comment. Even one word helps. Share this with a woman who needs to be reminded of her own strength. Who needs to know that her exhaustion is not a failure. Pray for us as we keep digging into these texts. And may the God who sees every battle fought in the quiet corners of your home stand with you in the trenches and remind you of the armor you have been wearing all along. His head rests against the cold wood, the stale scent of fermented wine and sweet myrrh still clinging to the heavy linen of his robes. The Queen Mother uses to introduce her in verse 10. It is a word that has been systematically softened by centuries of English translation. When you open a standard Bible, you will usually read about an excellent wife, or a virtuous woman, or a woman of noble character. Those words sound lovely. They sound safe. They sound like someone you would want running a charity bake sale, but they strip the teeth completely out of the Hebrew text. They take a lioness and turn her into a house cat. To see the woman, the Queen Mother is actually describing to her son. You have to step away from the domestic lens. You have to trace this specific word backward through the centuries, to places where the stakes were life and death. But before we can look at the battlefield, we have to look at what we replaced it with. We have to look at the impossible standard. She wakes while it is still dark. She feeds her entire household. She considers a field. She buys it. She plants a vineyard with her own hands. She spins thread. She weaves cloth. She makes garments. She sells them at the market. She gives to the poor. She never fears the snow. She smiles at the future. Look at that list. Read it as a literal daily schedule. It demands a 3-6-hour day. It requires limitless capital. You can hear the morning wind shifting sand against the stone steps. Standing over him, casting a long, rigid shadow across the sunlit floor. It requires a body that never breaks, a mind that never fractures, and a spirit that never feels the weight of the dark. Translate this into the modern world. She is up at 4 a.m. The coffee is brewing before the sun rises. She meal preps flawless lunches. She runs a profitable real estate portfolio. She hand knits winter scarves. She volunteers at the local shelter. She never raises her voice at her children. She never lets the laundry pile up on the bedroom floor. For decades, modern culture has handed this passage to women like a syllabus. We took an ancient Hebrew poem and weaponized it. We turned it into an existential performance review. And the result is suffocating. Women read verse 15, and they feel a tightening in their chest. They look at the sticky kitchen counters. They stare at the unread emails flashing on a glass screen. They grip the cold steering wheel on the morning commute, feeling the profound, aching exhaustion of just trying to hold a life together through a Tuesday. And they feel like they are failing. The Proverbs 31 woman becomes a ghost. She haunts every quiet moment. A standard no one can reach. A mirror reflecting every perceived inadequacy. This is the danger of reading the Bible through a modern domestic lens. We miss the mechanics of the poetry. We miss the structure of the ink on the parchment. Is not a prophet. It is not a general holding a scroll of enemy troop movements. It is his mother. We miss the fact that the Queen Mother did not write a to-do list for a young wife. She wrote an acrostic poem. There are 22 verses describing this woman. Each verse begins with a successive letter of the Hebrew alphabet. Aleph, Bet, Gimel, all the way to Tav. It is an A to Z masterpiece. It is the ancient equivalent of saying, she is everything from A to Z. It is poetry designed to encompass total, overwhelming capability. Proverbs 31 is not a performance review. It is a coronation. And the Jewish culture understands this perfectly. In the Jewish tradition, a husband does not pull out this text to point out what his wife failed to accomplish that week. He does not use it to measure her. He uses it to sing over her. But to hear how that song sounds, you have to leave the modern living room. You have to step into a dining room on a Friday night. The sun dips below the horizon in Jerusalem. The city slows. The noise of the marketplace fades into the quiet rustle of olive trees in the evening wind. Inside a stone house, a woman strikes a match and lights 2 white candles. The flame catches, the wax begins to pool, and the scent of warm, braided bread fills the dining room. The Sabbath begins. This is the exact historical moment that births Proverbs 31. We do not know much about King Lemuel. History has forgotten the borders of his kingdom. Her husband stands at the head of a table set with silver and glass. He holds a cup filled to the brim with dark wine. The week has been exhausting. The fields were hard. The negotiations in the city gates were frustrating. And the labor of holding a family together, through the chaos of ancient life, has taken its toll on both of them. He looks across the flickering candlelight at his wife, and he begins to sing. He does not read to her from a scroll like a magistrate issuing demands. He chants a rhythmic, ancient melody. He sings the 22 verses of Proverbs 31. This is the Jewish tradition of Eshet Chayil. Every Friday night, across centuries and continents, husbands have stood at the Sabbath table and sung this exact poem over the women in their lives. They sing it to the woman who managed the finances brilliantly that week. They sing it to the woman who burned the bread. They sing it to the woman who is sitting at the table so profoundly exhausted she can barely keep her eyes open. Because in the Jewish tradition, Proverbs 31 is not a measurement of her productivity. It is a recognition of her magnitude. It is a weekly declaration that her presence is the gravity keeping the household from spinning off into the dark, the wars he waged, and the monuments he built. But history has preserved the fierce, urgent words. His mother speaks to him on this morning. The song does not demand more work from her. It honors the absolute, staggering weight of the work she has already done. But when we translate this song into English, we lose the gravity. We smooth the edges. We turn a song of profound power into a polite compliment about her moral character. To feel the actual weight of what the husband is singing over the table, you have to look at the phrase that gives the song its name. You have to look at the first two words of verse 10. Because when the Queen Mother opened her mouth to describe this woman, she did not use a word associated with domestic peace. She used a word that belongs on a battlefield. Proverbs chapter 31, verse 10. This is the gateway to the poem, the aleph of the acrostic. In almost every modern English translation, the verse reads like a gentle inquiry. An excellent wife, who can find? Or perhaps, a virtuous woman, who can find? It sounds like the search for someone who is exceedingly polite, morally upright, and impeccably well-behaved. But the word the Queen Mother speaks is the Hebrew Chayil. The phrase in the original text is Eshet Chayil. Eshet simply means woman or wife. But Chayil is a word that echoes with the metallic clash of iron and the heavy dust of the front line. She leans in, her voice cutting through the quiet palace air. And she delivers an oracle. She warns him about the things that ruin men in power. It appears over 240 times in the Old Testament, and its range of meaning is astonishing. In the vast majority of its appearances, the ancient scribes used it to describe wealth, force, an army, and staggering physical or mental strength. It is the exact same word used in the Hebrew text to describe King David's elite fighting force. When the Old Testament writers talk about the mighty men who fought in the trenches, who defended borders, who carried heavy leather shields into the blinding chaos of combat, they call them Giborei Chayil, mighty men of valor, men of immense substance. But when that exact same word is applied to a woman in Proverbs 31, the English translators suddenly retreat. They look at the word Chayil, a word soaked in military strength and strategic power. And they decide it must mean something softer when applied to a wife. They erase the armor. They hand her a broom. They translate it as virtuous or noble or excellent, turning a warrior into a wealthy socialite. If something about this discovery is stirring up questions you've never considered, you're exactly who this channel is for. Drop a thought in the comments and hit subscribe. Because every week we go deeper into the text than you knew was possible. So the English translators soften the ink. She tells him not to drain his strength on women who break kingdoms. She tells him not to numb his mind with strong drink. But the Queen Mother was not softening anything. She was delivering a profound revelation to her son about the true nature of female strength. When you restore the original language, Proverbs 31:10 does not ask who can find an excellent wife. It asks, a woman of valor. Who can find? That root changes everything. The Queen Mother is not looking for someone who is merely well-behaved. She is looking for a force of nature. Eshet Chayil is a woman who possesses the kind of resilience that can withstand a siege. She has the strategic capacity to manage resources, to protect her household from economic famine, and fortify her people against the freezing winds of ancient winters. The poem is not a domestic checklist. It is a military blueprint. And once you see the warrior in verse 10, you start to notice that the rest of the chapter is hiding a very specific kind of combat. The combat begins before the sun rises. A spark strikes flint in the pitch black. The oil catches fire in a clay lamp. The cold stone floor bites at her bare feet. But she is already moving. She does not wake up slowly. She rises to fortify a compound. Read the poem again. Look at the verbs. She secures provisions. She delegates authority. She evaluates real estate. She negotiates a purchase. She plants a vineyard, while the poor are being crushed in the dust of his streets. She demands a king who sees. And then, halfway through her speech, she pivots. These are not domestic chores. They are tactical maneuvers. Look closely at verse 17. The English translations often say she dresses herself with strength. It sounds like putting on a lovely sweater. But the Hebrew phrase is shagar matnaim. It literally means she girds her loins. You do not gird your loins to sweep a kitchen. You gird your loins to fight. It is the exact same phrase used for an ancient soldier, preparing for hand-to-hand combat. You grab the heavy linen of your tunic. You pull it up. You tuck it tightly into a thick leather belt. You free your legs so you can move without tripping when the enemy breaches the gate. Look at her defense strategy in verse 21. Winter is coming. The freezing desert wind is pushing through the cracks in the stone walls. But she does not panic. She has already clothed her entire household in scarlet. Heavy, double-layered red wool. The cold will not break her people. The perimeter is secure. Look at her economic dominance in verse 24. She manufactures linen. She delivers it to the merchants. She dictates terms to the Canaanite traders at the city gates. She is not running a small hobby out of a back room. She controls a supply chain. She is the economic engine holding a massive household together against the crushing weight of ancient poverty. And look at her posture in verse 25. She smiles at the future.